And there's a lot of people that won't touch, Southern California, just because they're looking for different things. The cash flow is certainly a lot harder to squeeze in Southern California than it is in the markets you touched on. But what attracted me to this market was a few things. Number one is it's been a constant over the last decade plus that there's not enough affordable housing in San Diego. There's just not. The cost to own versus the cost to rent it's probably the biggest gap of any city in the country. It's about over $3,000 a month difference to own in San Diego versus rent, and that is a
Wow.
huge gap. So what does that do? It keeps a tremendous amount of pressure on the rental market. The vacancies are extremely low, and it is hard to find affordable housing. So that's number one, is that you have a very strong rental market because of that. Number two, San Diego geographically is constrained. It is, if you look at it on a map, it's actually like an island. You have Mexico immediately to the south. You have the Pacific Ocean to the west. You have Camp Pendleton to the north. And you have a mountain range that runs from Mexico up through San Diego County, up through LA, and beyond. And it's really not developed. You can't develop on those mountain ranges. And so what you have is a geographical island that San Diego is sitting in, which prevents massive expansion. Some of the expansion we see in markets like Houston or Dallas, even Phoenix has expanded like crazy. But in San Diego, you really can't do that. You can't just say, okay, we're going to expand here, we're going to expand there. The land doesn't exist anymore.
Mm.
And so because of that, again, there's not a massive relief button that the city can push to create housing. And so when they created this ADU law it passed in 19 and went into effect in 2020, that allowed you to convert existing multifamily apartments that had existing square footage, that's convertible, basically something that's surrounded by three walls. You could convert that into additional units. And in San Diego, the city of San Diego went from roughly 300,000 people in the 1940s to now, there's 3.6 million people in San Diego County.
Wow.
So rapid growth. And during that time of growth, 60s, 70s, 80s, the mandate was to have parking and ensure that there was enough parking for these apartments. And these apartments that were being built were 5 to 40 units. That makes up about 90% of the market in San Diego. And their requirement was to have garages. Well, as time has moved on, the garages have morphed into storage and junk. They're not really parking cars. They're just parking people's junk. And in many cases, we found this out after the fact, but in many cases, the garages are being leased by somebody that doesn't even live at the property.
Mm.
Somebody down the street is leasing it for $100, $50, rather than getting a storage unit, that's $700, $800. And so that is really what these garages have in them. And so the city, I think, knew that. And when the state passed, this is a state law that was passed, allowing you to convert for every for every 4 existing units you have, you can add 1 additional unit to the property, as long as you're not adding. There's many different ADU laws. Okay, the one we're taking advantage of is the multifamily one, where we're not adding additional square footage to the property. We're just changing that square footage, which really means converting garages. Like I mentioned, you could do laundry rooms. You could do, if there's storage rooms outside of a garage, you can convert things like that. So we're not adding additional square footage. We're just changing what the existing square footage is. And so when that law was passed in the state, we were like, oh, this is great. We can certainly take advantage. There's over 8,000 properties, multifamily properties in San Diego that fall under this criteria, which is an incredible amount. And then in November of 2020, the city of San Diego said, that's not enough housing. We have all these garages. We're making it unlimited. You can do unlimited conversions. as long as it fits the code. And so, for an example, we bought a 5-unit building that had 7 garages, and we converted those 7 garages for a total of 12. And so
Wow.
we have a 12 unit apartment. If that was anywhere else in California besides the city of San Diego, we would have only been able to add one more unit. So we would have went from 5 to 6 because of the state law. But the San Diego code is so aggressive, because they want this affordable housing, that they made it unlimited. And so that has been those, you put all those reasons together, along with the fact that San Diego is an extremely diverse economy. It used to be 100% based on government, military. That's really how the city grew. But now it is a very diverse economy. The government's still a big part of it. There's a ton of there's a ton of active duty bases. Military personnel is up and down the city. But you also have there is no driving sector that's more than about 15% of the overall economy. So
Mm.
it's very diverse. It's actually San Diego's become like the biotech capital of the U.S. We've seen a ton of biotech spun up here, especially since COVID. So that biotech industry has boomed, bringing a lot of jobs to San Diego. And so all those factors, when you combine them all, to me, it made San Diego very, very attractive. And because of the cost is so expensive, if you add just 1 unit to a building, you're significantly impacting that value. If you add 10 units to a building, well,
Yeah.
now you're have a good opportunity. If it costs, $100,000 to add, and a post construction value is 300,000, it's a nice delta there. And so when we looked at this and said, okay, this makes a lot of sense. We do know it's California, so things are going to be hard. It will not be easy. The government made it sound easy, but reality is it has been everything but that. But we have been able to get things done. But the biggest thing, Kirby, is that we knew that in 2020, when COVID hit, we expected some kind of decline of commercial real estate.
Hmm.
And of course, immediately afterwards, we were exactly wrong. Everything took off,
Yeah.
right? Because the cost of borrowing money was incredibly cheap. Just having housing was super valuable, and basically construction was halted. There was nothing being done. So rents across America shot up, values across America shot up, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is great! We're making all this money in real estate," and you could not lose in commercial real estate from 2020 to 2022. Then all of a sudden, it's up. We have a problem. Inflation is through the roof. We need to curb that. So let's put on, let's bring these interest rates up to combat the inflation. And so we weren't right about the timing of when the market would go down, but it did happen. And so our plan was, in a down market, if we're able to add units to a building and we're able to improve the existing units, that should be enough to carry us through a real estate recession. And so the thought is always protect the downside.
Hmm.
Protect the downside. Always project the downside and protect it. And that's, for me, I was a defensive coach, Kirby. So, playing the defense
I hear you.
comes naturally. And, that's what we look to do. Our strategy was a defensive strategy to buy real estate, in a time where we thought it would go down, and figure out how to withstand a down market. And so
Got
that's
it.
really, those factors all led me to say, yep, let's do San Diego.
Yeah. Wow.
Long-winded answer to your simple question, Kirby.
No, that's super interesting. And there's typically a lot of factors that play into it. So I appreciate you kind of breaking that down, and it makes a lot of sense. And one thing I was thinking about as you're describing that too is, there's been a lot of talk about these self-driving cars, and how, in the next decade or so, there's already cities with plenty of self-driving cars that'll pick you up when you call it Uber or whatever the name of the company is with the self-driving cars. But a lot of people are saying eventually people just won't need cars because, anywhere you want to go, it's just on demand. A self-driving car takes you there. So why would you park a car in your garage all that time that you're not using it? So it could lead to way less cars on the road, way less need for garages. And so you guys are kind of ahead of the ball game here, converting these garages, because that could very
Yeah.
well be the case.
Yeah. I think, yeah, plus and minus. Being ahead is good and bad.
Yeah.
If we were at that point right now, then the values would be even greater.
Yeah.
Because then the next buyer is going to say, "Oh, why do I don't need these. I don't need this parking. I'm not worried about the parking ratio. We're getting rid of cars."
Yeah.
And that did factor into our decision making process. Number one, in San Diego, people are like, our strategy. I probably wouldn't be as aggressive if I was doing this in Philadelphia or Boston. Because then in the wintertime, people are not wanting to walk to work, and the parking factor is a huge decision maker. But in San Diego, the weather's great all year round. Maybe I have to walk a block and a half to get to my car, but I'm willing to do that because I'm living in San Diego.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we're seeing a lot of the folks that will rent our conversions, a lot of them don't even have a car. They're either biking to work, they're walking, they're taking Uber, and I think what you're saying is kind of the next step, is that many people will just stop having their car, or if they have it, they'll drop them off and go park on its own, and go find a place to park without having the owner worry about it. So I do believe that is coming. How quickly, I don't know, but I think that that will enable our strategy to keep moving forward. And I think when we start seeing that, more and more people will jump on board. You'll probably see people jump into the industry when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Can you kind of walk me through maybe a recent deal or a typical deal on, the numbers of what it costs you to buy something like this? And then it's really interesting, to think about that conversion, like, converting a garage, like what does that cost to do that? And, your timeline, and then what does that do to the value? Like maybe that 5 unit that you turned 8 of the garage spaces into 8 more units. What did that look like in terms of numbers?
Yeah. So that one we bought for right around, I think it was around 1.1 million. So a very cheap buy in San Diego. We got 5 units for that price, which was a good buy. And then the cost to do the units is about 100,000 each, is what it's worked out to be. It's a little bit less, but with the construction costs, everything rose over 2020, 21, 22. We're sitting right now about 100,000 each. So the way we structured that specific deal is we took a bank loan with pretty low leverage, so around a 50 to 60% leverage on the purchase, and then we raised the equity to do the construction. So we brought the investors brought money for the down payment, and then brought money for the construction of the garages. So like I said, it's about 100,000 each. And upon, what you got to go through is you go through permitting. So everything's done, above board. You go through the city, you submit your plans. The permitting took way longer than we had hoped.
Shocking.
The second plan too for the property. So not only did we do the permitting for the units, but we also planned on renovating existing units. Okay. So the rents were probably $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 a month, which was well below market.
Yeah.
So we renovated all 5 of the units. We ended up getting around $2,000 a month for each of those in rent. So we pretty much doubled the rental income right there. And then the permitting took about about 12 months. Now we're about 6 months in permitting in today's world. Back then it was a little newer and it was taking forever. It's about 12 months of permitting. Took another probably 12 months of construction. Again, because they inspect, it's bureaucracy, California. They inspect every step of the way and makes construction much longer than it needs to be. more expensive as well. And so fast forward about by month, I think month 26, 27, 28, we started leasing the units. They leased for, these were all, we built all studios. So we built 7 studio apartments, very tiny. They're like 200 square feet,
Oh, wow.
extremely small. But it's how you can keep the cost down
Hmm.
for the tenant. And so those rents were right around 1,400 to 1,500. And so we significantly increased the income that the property was making by adding those additional units, by renovating the existing units. And so in commercial real estate, everything's driven by NOI, net operating income. So the money that the property brings in, and that's how they're valued. Um, so what we did was, because when we finished this, the market was kind of dead. This was middle or towards spring of last year. So the sales market in the commercial real estate world was almost came to a screeching halt um, to the second half of 2024. Everybody's kind of hit the pause button, wanted to see what's going to happen to interest rates, want to see what's going to happen to the elections, want to see what happened to local elections, local laws that have been put up for vote. And so we said, okay, well, we created all of this value. We don't want to sell at a time that's not ideal. And so we said, all right, let's refinance. And we ended up refinancing into a Freddie small balance loan, which is a government backed loan, which is how you can get your best rates that way. We refinanced and we closed in September with an interest rate of 5.7%. So that we timed it. We got lucky. We timed it right kind of when there was a little dip in interest rates last September. Got the 5.7. We were distributed, I'd say probably $1 million back. They valued the property at I think 2.9 million. So we went from
Nice.
buying it at 1.1. Now we're valued at 2.9. And investors were distributed most of their initial investment back. We still own the property. We're still slightly positive cash flow every month right now. And we'll wait to sell, for the right time. And that could be now. The market's definitely, there's been more and more activity right now than we've seen probably over the last 2 years. I expect that to continue to build. And we'll see what happens. But, we've created a lot of equity. We're in a really good position, and a great way to take advantage of it. And that's just one way you can slice this, Kirby. There's a lot of different ways, and we've done multiple ways. This is one way to do it, and it helps to have folks that know what they're doing to give you advice and walk you along the steps that you have. The one thing I say, Kirby, is always try to have options, right? Like anything in life, you'd like to have options. You don't want to be boxed into a corner. Sometimes that's inevitable, but if you can have options, it is certainly allows you to make the best decisions for your projects and your properties.